Hello, everyone. This is Dr. Stuart A. Swerdlow.
And Janet Diane Moria Swerdlow.
And this is the Expansions News Podcast for the middle of May, actually Mother's Day week of 2019.
So does it mean that it's a good thing for me?
Well, we'll find out later. But before I get into the news, I just wanted to make a brief comment about the passing of Duncan Cameron, who passed away on May 9, 2019. And just so that I personally don't get emotional during this broadcast, I refer all of you to my blog on expansions.com, where I have written an article about Duncan and our relationship and so on. So I please refer you to that article. And I also ask that you send prayers for him, that he should be protected wherever he is. So, going on to the news, there is a Muslim activist who is issuing an urgent warning to Christians around the world about the growing and very real threat of radical Islam. And a quote, this man's name is Mohammed Tahidi. He said, if Christians don't wake up, if Christian leaders don't wake up, then we Muslims who fled from extremists can't help you anymore. This Muslim is from Australia. He says, we tried warning you. He's a third-generation Iranian-born Muslim and the author of The Tragedy of Islam, which says political correctness is allowing radical Muslims with their dangerous and deadly ideology to flourish. And again, a quote, when we come to the West and try to warn the governments and intelligence agencies about what is happening, about the people we fled from, we have this new political correctness agenda that tells us that we are the racists and we are the ones who are traitors and the extremists need to be understood and embraced. That's very sad and quite disgusting. Tawhidi says that even though the Islamic terror group ISIS lost its territory in Syria and Iraq, the group's followers and sympathizers are still actively planning mayhem. He says we're fighting a real caliphate. According to German newspaper Die Welt, Islamic extremists have carried out 31,211 attacks in the last 18 years. Those attacks have killed 146,811 people around the world, and most of those were actually Muslims. Here's a white racist for you right here.
White privilege.
She's actually a terrorist. He says, look, I'm a Muslim, but I cannot live in an Islamic theocracy. He said, I can live in a Christian government based on their constitution, because that is where peace lies. I cannot live in a place where ISIS rules the area. And this is a very interesting line. He says, no Muslim with a brain that works would want to live under ISIS. And I agree with him. The extremists are programmed and mind-controlled soldiers of the deep state. And they really do need to be eliminated. There's no such thing as political correctness in this case. They need to go. Speaking of people who are politically incorrect, Representative Ilhan Omar appeared to take the side of Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad after these terrorists from Gaza fired over 600 rockets into Israel and killed people. And there is a 2012 tweet from Omar that has resurfaced, in which she says Israel has hypnotized the world. I think it's quite the opposite. She needs to be deported and stripped of her U.S. citizenship. She entered this country illegally, and she needs to be deported, along with her other cohorts. Now, hundreds of regular Austrian citizens expressed to the national newspaper their view on migration, with some saying they feel like foreigners in their own country. They were commenting on the concept of population replacement. And in response to the opinion article in Austria's largest newspaper, Kronenzeitung, that agreed that there is a conspiracy going on. they republished some of the hundreds of responses they have received, to the point where some felt highly alienated in Austria. In at least 2 Austrian classrooms as of 2017, there were not only a majority of migrant pupils, but no native Austrians at all, and very few even spoke German. And despite being born in Austria, they had not learned German before entering school, which limits their educational and future job prospects. On the streets, in the public transport, and in the municipal buildings, we feel like foreigners in our own home, said one of the readers. Most Europeans do not want the immigrants in their countries. And again, I go to George Soros and the next person I'm going to be talking about, who has fomented this invasion of Europe. Pope Francis addressed participants at a Vatican conference and denounced the trend towards nationalism that entails, as he says, excessive demands for sovereignty. The Pope went on to say that the way in which a nation welcomes migrants reveals its vision of human dignity and its relationship with humanity. Well, that's a matter of opinion. Hold on a second. This terrorist needs to go. He went on to say, when a person or family is forced to leave their land, they must be welcomed with humanity. The migrant, Francis continued, is not a threat to the culture, customs, and values of the receiving nation. Really, Pope Francis, have you looked out of the window of the Vatican to see what's going on in Rome? The pontiff reiterated his belief that migration is part of and parcel of human history and the formation of nations. But now nations exist and have developed their own culture, language, and belief system, and you're asking them to be invaded. He says, in the current situation of globalization, the nation state is no longer able to procure the common good of its populations alone. The common good has become global, and nations must associate for their own benefit. Francis also said that supranational entities should have the real authority over nations to intervene in matters of great global import, such as climate change, which doesn't exist. And so basically the Pope is saying there should be a dictatorship over the world, and any nation that has its own decision is overruled by that dictatorship. And that's what the EU basically is. He goes on to say, when a supranational common good is clearly identified, it is necessary to have a special authority that is legally and concordantly constituted and capable of facilitating its implementation. In other words, a Gestapo that will force the implementation of what this special authority wants. Well, here's my answer to Pope Francis, or I should call him Poop Francis. Let him remove the Vatican walls that have been around for over 1,000 years around the Vatican, and allow thousands of Africans and Arabs to live in the Vatican. Let him open up all the rooms of the Vatican and let them live there and see how he likes it.
Well, and they could go underneath too. There's plenty of room.
This information has proven beyond a shadow of a doubt that the Pope is up the butts of the deep state, and not only one of their puppets, one of their main spokespeople. Now, speaking of ridiculous people, let's talk about the royal baby, who has arrived, according to official information, May 6th, 2019. Of course, Harry let it slip out that babies change a lot over 2 weeks. So maybe he was born 2 weeks before that. But here's the interesting quote that he said when he was brought the baby out. He said, as every father or parent would ever say, your baby is absolutely amazing. But this little thing is absolutely to die for. He called his baby a thing, and that you should die for it. So they called it Archie Harrison. Archie, of course, they said they named it after one of his soldier friends who convinced him to stay in the army when he wanted to leave.
No, I saw it was.
It was just on today.
Oh yeah, because I also saw that supposedly Archibald was.
Well, they said he named it after a friend that he knew in the military. But Archie is short for Archangel. Archangel Satan, perhaps. And it's a thing. And people will die for him. Is that what he's saying? Harrison, of course, means Harry's son. And I was thinking about this a lot. Why Meghan cut her father off like she did. And why the father made a statement and said that he hopes the baby is blessed by God, capital G-O-D, emphasizing God. Because I believe he knows, and Meghan knows, that this child is a demonic entity. Maybe it's the Antichrist. And that's why they're sending Meghan and Harry and the baby to Africa.
And maybe her mother.
And maybe her mother, where they said that they will become the king and queen of Africa.
And I always remind people that on Prince William's 21st birthday, that the Queen had an African-themed party.
Yes, I wonder what the people of Africa will think about that.
Mm-hmm. And also remember, Princess Diana, Princess Di is what she was called. Mm-hmm. And do you remember also the BBC reporter that tweeted that the royal family is leaving the hospital and showed two royals with a baby chimp?
Yes.
And he was fired. However, I read the article, he was actually been fired from BBC 2 other times. So my feeling is this was some kind of
it's not
staged...
nice. It was a racist thing that he did, and it wasn't nice. But I'm telling you that this child is a demonic entity, and that's why she's cut off her father, because he knows, and that's why he said it should be blessed by God. Anyway, let me continue on. So apparently, changing the subject, you know that the Q is a military it's a military intelligence operation to remove the deep state. And 6 of those members are military. The rest are not, and there is information that says some are not even from this world. Well, lo and behold, on January 26th of 2017, a U.S. patent was entered, and it was U.S., I'll give you the number, 2017/0025935, and it is for an electromagnetic field generator and method to generate an electromagnetic field in order to deflect asteroids, huge solar flares from the sun, and to generate astounding power and electromagnetic field intensity values at a level of 10 to the 24th to 28th power watts per meter squared and beyond. That is not human technology. The information suggests that this extraordinary patent for the U.S. government is, and it says in this, quote, without payment of any royalties thereon or therefore. So actually, could this be from a friendly, non-human intelligence that interacts with the Earth and our solar system? Finally, to remove the deep state. Perhaps from one of the non-human members of Q. That is my belief. This next story, I can't explain because I'm still doing research on it, but it struck me as very strange. 2 families and 3 crew members who died in a private plane crash returning from a Las Vegas boxing match in the Mexican mountains, of killing, of course, 13 people. Of course,
I saw that
13.
story too.
All 13 people who died on the plane have been identified. The downed plane was located in a remote mountainous area of Ocampo, which is in northern Mexico. The plane was on its way to Monterrey. Officials say no one on board survived. The passengers were the families of 2 executives from Typhoon Oil Firm. The plane was registered, however, to Utah-based TVPX, which is listed as an insurance and customs and trust company. And the company declined to comment on who was operating the plane. Local reports say there was a strong storm in the area at the time of the crash, and it appeared that the pilot had intended to descend to avoid the weather. First of all, on a very expensive private jet with such highly wealthy Mexican oil executives and their families, they would have instructed the pilot to either not fly into that weather, fly around the weather, get some kind of alternate route. They were within minutes of landing in Monterey, and then they crashed. And there was something going on about this crash, and I'm going to investigate further to see exactly what was going on, what they were really doing in Las Vegas. Now, speaking of the weather, which, as you know, we were filming this on Mother's Day, and it's very, very cold outside, and you need a winter coat. But not only here in North America, almost all of Europe has seen a return for a few days of winter-like weather when an Arctic wind blew south as the month of May came in and centered a low-pressure system over Scandinavia. And there was heavy snow and ice all over the Alps and in parts of Western and Northern Europe. And here in North America, snow and ice also continues, especially in the Rocky Mountains, Northern Great Lakes, and Plains area. And it's been a very cold spring. I think one of the coldest I can ever remember. Now, my last story, in my books I tell you about how history is a lie, and how artifacts are found and covered up, and there have been migrations that are not documented. Well, guess what? In the desert of Utah, they have discovered mysterious Spanish coins that predate Christopher Columbus by more than 200 years. And they were found in Glen Canyon Park. One of them is dated to the 1200s, and of course we know Columbus arrived in the Caribbean in 1492, so almost 2,500 years. The desert remains, the presence in the desert remains unexplained, and no information has been released about whether other artifacts have been found. So here's more proof that history is a lie. They also did not tell you, which is in my books, that Hebrew coins over 2,000 years old were found in New Mexico and Arizona, and so on. So there's a lot going on in history and in the world that is kept covered up.
And that's why we have you to help us figure it out.
Yeah, well, I need help myself.
All right, so I have a couple of stories too, and my first one I think is fascinating, especially because of what's, Meghan Markle and Prince Harry's baby. Mm-hmm. Well, this one just kind of popped up, and I don't know if anybody else saw it or not, but in my opinion, it has to do with ritual and the Black Philosopher. So you have to tell me your opinion on this one. I don't know if you saw it or not. Apparently, Ethiopia is requesting the Queen to return the bones of a stolen Ethiopian prince. Have you heard of that story?
No.
Prince Alamayehu.
Did she eat him, and that's why they want the bones?
Maybe.
Back?
Was buried in catacombs next to St. George's Chapel in Windsor. And this is the same chapel that Meghan and Harry got married in. Okay, remember that.
Also, maybe they'll go to Ethiopia.
Maybe. So anyway, apparently for the last 12 years they've been asking for the remains. So how did these remains get there, and why will they not be returned? Well, apparently Prince Alamayehu was brought to England after his father, Emperor Tewodros II, killed himself as British forces stormed his mountaintop palace in northern Ethiopia in 1868. Now, did he really kill himself? This is the British story. According to this report, a few days ago, Fasiha Shawel Jabre, is that how you would say that name?
I don't speak that
Ethiopian
language.
Ethiopia's ambassador to London urged the Queen to consider how she would feel if one of her deceased relatives was buried in a foreign land. Would she happily lie in bed every day, go to sleep, having one of her royal family members buried somewhere taken as prisoner of war? This is just a few days ago.
Wait, it's going to happen again.
And he asked, I don't think she would. So the Ethiopian government has vowed to repeat its demand at every meeting its ministers have with their British counterparts. So according to the British stories, in 1868, a British force invaded Ethiopia after the emperor took the British consul and several missionaries hostage. Then, after his army was destroyed and his fortress captured, supposedly the emperor shot himself. Then, according to British accounts, he instructed his wife to ensure that their son should be taken to Britain after the battle. That makes no sense, right? So, the Ethiopian ambassador to London claims the boy was stolen, not taken there because his father said. So then, once they got to Britain, guess what? Apparently she went with the mother, and the mother died of illness. So
Yes,
I think
well,
she
poison.
or murder.
Poisonitis.
Then the boy was taken to Queen Victoria, who described him as, quote, pretty, polite, and graceful, and enrolled him at Sandhurst. Well, then guess what? In 1879, at the age of 18, he died. Now, they are saying from tuberculosis, but again, sounds to me like perhaps a ritual murder.
Or maybe they wanted him to be a servant in the castle and he refused.
I don't know. But he was interred then in the catacombs near this chapel where Prince Harry and Meghan were married. So then in 2007, the Ethiopian government wrote to the Queen requesting the return of his body so he could be buried beside his father. Ethiopia is stating, had he not been taken, had he not lost his father, he would have been the next king of Ethiopia. So then apparently they got a letter from the Queen's private secretary that said, while the Queen sympathized, there was concerns about disturbing the remains of others buried alongside him, because it's understood that more than 40 bodies were buried in the catacombs in this time period. And according to palace sources, it would be impossible to identify and exhume the body without disturbing the sacred space.
Oh, that's baloney.
That's what the ambassador to Ethiopia said. He said, I don't think they have forgotten where they put it. There's a record.
I'm sure it's well labeled.
Now this is the next is also interesting. Apparently in March, the National Army Museum in Chelsea returned 2 locks of hair cut from the head of the emperor after his defeat. Why would they take 2 locks of his hair?
This is ritualistic power.
Exactly. That's what I'm explaining to these people here. So then if they have 2 locks of his hair, then what else might they have that they're not?
His blood.
Or maybe they even have his whole body or his head. Who knows? We are extremely friendly governments. This is what the ambassador of Ethiopia says. So we don't understand why they're keeping the prince's body in the UK.
I think you do understand.
And the palace spokesman said, we are aware of this sensitive and complex issue and have communicated with the Ethiopian government over a number of years. So they're still keeping the body of this prince. So I think it's a very interesting story, especially considering what's going on with Meghan Markle and her genetics and now the new baby and the new baby's genetics. Okay, next thing. Now, I have told you about the organization, or I guess the movement called Birth Strike, which has to do with supposedly not having babies because of climate change.
Oh, right.
Now we have a sex strike.
I heard about that.
This is being called for by actress Alyssa Milano,
Yeah, I
who's
don't know what happened.
46.
She used to be such a cute little kid.
She was
She became
adorable.
a jerk. She's
Anyway,
a real jerk now.
She said that she called on her vast social media to abstain from sex until the restrictive abortion law in Georgia is repealed.
Yeah.
Now, what good would that do, and who's going to do that?
I wish her mother had abstained from sex.
Yeah. Apparently, as I have been reported on, it's called the Heartbeat Bill, which makes it illegal for women to have an abortion after heartbeat has been detected in the womb, typically around the 6-week mark.
And I agree with that. You know, by 6 weeks, you know if you want it or not.
Well, by 6 weeks, I mean, in my opinion, life starts at conception. So to me,
Yes,
in my
yes.
opinion, it's all about murder, even from the beginning.
And that's what I talk
So-
about in my seminars.
So
Ritualistic killing of children,
Yes.
both before and after birth,
Yeah.
to the astral gods.
Yeah. So anyway, I just think this is all something you need to be aware of, and they keep bringing out all these different things. And the other thing, of course, what they're trying to get you to do is head toward the artificial womb, because you don't want to have sex, you don't want to have babies, you don't want to have them aborted, blah, blah. So therefore, the artificial womb, and then you have your Borg mentality. And then going on to climate change. Now here's another brilliant idea, which you'll love. If you haven't seen this was someone sent this to me, so thank you for the story. Sir David King, who's a University of Cambridge professor, has proposed that in order to reverse damage done by humans, that we refreeze the polar regions.
How, pray tell, shall we do that?
Well, according to him, there's an area of research known as geoengineering that's growing, or climate engineering, but they haven't had the funds to take care of that. So he says that they not only want to capture carbon dioxide from out of the atmosphere, but they want to spray salt water in the air and do all kinds of things. So I don't know. They call it
Well, don't worry, because Ice Age is on its way, so you don't have to do all that.
climate hacking. But he says, again, they're trying to instill fear in the population. He says, what we plan to do over the next 10 to 12 years will determine the future of humanity for the next 10,000 years. So they're just trying to instill fear in people. Yep. Then the next one now, of course, we know soon you're leaving to go to Turkey. Well, in Turkey, there is a mountain called Mount Chimera. I don't know how you say that. Chimera?
Where's the...
C-H-I.
I can't read your handwriting.
Well, I don't think I have it typed out. But that word, how do you say that word?
Oh, Chimera.
Chimera, okay. Mount Chimera, which is a mysterious methane fueling fire breathing mountain in Turkey. Have you heard of it? Apparently, their scientists have found these kind of flames all over the world. They come out of water and they come out of rocks, and they can't attribute them to organic material. So believe it or not, they're tying this into alien life, and that's what I wrote about.
It's methane.
Well, yes and no. So what I want to bring out here specifically is two things. The name of the mountain, Chimera.
Which is a mixed species.
And it's also, some call it a monster, and some call it a myth. But it has to do, again, with tying us into alien life. And that's what I talked about on my podcast quite a bit, about how everything now, okay, climate change, alien life. So they're going to tie this into alien life. So this is how they do this story. So they say that the gas is thought to originate from a process known as serpentinization. Serpentinization. Okay, you can go remember that. So apparently, like I just said, that most methane gas comes from organic material, such as the decay of plants and algae and animal, blah, blah. But this comes from a chemical reaction within the rocks themselves. And so apparently they've found this throughout the world, and they've actually found it in places like the Philippines, eastern Turkey, as well as places with springs with bubbles, such as Spain and Bosnia-Herzegovina.
Yeah, all those places have volcanic activity and fault lines.
You know, they're claiming in this that they don't, which is interesting.
But they do.
And then they're saying that how they find it is they look for these rocks called periodotite rocks that may generate hydrogen gas, and they're calling this an abiotic gas versus methane gas. So then they're tying it one step further to say that they have to learn to distinguish abiotic methane from organically produced methane, which will then help scientists identify life on other planets. I mean, it just goes on and on and on.
It's just ridiculous.
Then they go on to say that the methane gas found in the atmosphere of Mars, they don't know if that originates from organic material, which may point to microbial life, or to serpentinization below the planet's surface. And this makes the difference whether or not life exists on other planets. And they wrote about this in the Journal of Applied Geochemistry.
And there are many millions they spent to figure that little nonsense out.
Yeah, well, anyway, it just goes on and on, but it's very interesting how they're tying everything into climate change and into finding alien life. And of course, now I've got this big deal with the birth of the baby, tying this. Now we've got, why did they even tell us about the remains of this prince when it's been going on for 140 years ago when they took this child? So very interesting things going on in the news when you know how to interpret them. So that's what I have to say.
So thank you very much. I will not be here for the next couple of podcasts.
So it'll be up to me. So I showed you the books. Remember True World History and Galactic History, Blue Blood, True Blood. You want to read Stewart's autobiography, Montauk, Alien Connection, fascinating read. And of course, all our health and healing books, Hyperspace Plus, Hyperspace Helper, Healing Archetypes and Symbols. We have lots of things for you to read. We have the children's books, which are very popular. Great for if you have kids out over summer break. You might want to start them with this. Or if English is your second language, a lot of people like them. We have Universal Law, Decoding Your Life. We have Mind Control and How to Avoid It, Case Studies 13 Cubed. Stewart says is a great coffee table book. Our Daily Affirmations book, we are on our last part of our series, but we do have free to our members on the website our 3-year series we did on Decoding Your Life and some of these older ones that we've been working on. And of course, White Owl Legends, an archetypal story of creation. So lots to keep you busy and going. So thank you for joining us.
And those of you who are mothers or who are a mother figure, have a happy Mother's Day week. And again, please read my blog about the passing of Duncan Cameron. I appreciate your prayers and condolences.
Like, comment, subscribe, and share. And until next time, bye-bye.